Okay, this is getting a bit weird now. First you were hiding in my fridge, now you're hiding in my cupboard. Welcome to this week's In My Mug. This week we're off to Ethiopia for a rather special natural that I think we've all grown to love. Okay, so as I said this week, the coffee's coming from Ethiopia, and what I wanted to talk about was the unique way that Ethiopia operates. Ethiopia is normally very small producers, maybe with as little as 200 plants delivering to a washing station. And we have started to see a few estates forming, which are focusing on specialty, which is really, really cool. It's been held back a lot by the ECX. So the ECX is the Ethiopian Commodity Exchange. Ethiopian Commodity Exchange was somewhere where you had to sell coffee to then sell it out into the market, and it would be graded and scored by really good cuppers, like people who are massively educated in tasting and coffee and knew Ethiopian coffees inside out. But the problem was that there was no way of getting around that. You had to do that through the ECX. Now, Israel the Gefe, that is the owner of Sora and lots of other washing stations in Ethiopia, has been working with the government to come up with a way that to have the more direct contract sale, as well as the ECX. The ECX has its place and it does a really good job for the commodity side of the market in its name, Ethiopian Commodity Exchange. But for specialty, they needed a slightly different approach. Now, Israel, when I first met him, like six years ago, very small exporter, was not doing massive volumes. He's grown that business into exporting around about 10% of Ethiopia's entire production, which is just massive, huge. And he's done this by kind of focusing not just on specialty but also on the commodity. Every coffee needs a home, and just by focusing on one or the other, limits that market, and he's really managed to kind of become a specialist in both of them. I'm going to hand you over to Virtual Steve now, who's going to give you a little bit more info on the farm and on the area, and then we'll be coming back and doing the tasting. So thanks, Steve. Sora is a little bit of an anomaly in Ethiopia. Most farms are around about 200 trees and privately owned and then delivered to washing stations, where Sora is a privately owned farm owned by a second generation coffee farmer, Israel the Gefe. Israel grew up all around coffee. His father was a mill manager and his mum sold coffee in the local bus station to commuters. The estate is located in the Guji zone, due east of Yirgachev. Its western neighbour is Uraga, which is a coffee you may have heard of, and to the east is Adola, another coffee you may have heard of, both places where Israel also owns mills. As coffee farms go, it's a pretty new farm. It was only formed in 2013, located at 1,900 to a huge 2,350 metres above sea level. It's pretty big, but when you get up there, you start to understand quite how high it is and quite how cold it can get in the mornings and the evenings. So that slows down that maturation of the cherries. We're now into our 5th year of roasting and buying coffee from Sora, and it was exciting to go back in 2019 when I last visited the farm to see how much the farm has developed. So the farm has developed as in it has its own washing station now. Now this is a natural coffee, but in the past that was all that they did. And we will be seeing the wash coffee come later on in the season. And I'm also really lucky that we got to visit just before this whole crazy lockdown thing kind of finished and started and meant that we couldn't go travelling anymore. It is unusual to find a private farm of 250 hectares. And even more unusual to find it at such high altitudes. The privately owned farms tend to be owned by big companies that are just producing commodity grade coffee, whereas this one is producing some commodity grade coffee, but also focusing very much on specialty. Coffee growing in the area is very popular, and Israel also takes in cherries from the local producers as well. To make some other lots and to basically be a local place for people to deliver cherries, and it's really important that they have that it's close by, as quite often transport links in Ethiopia are pretty tough to get to. The washing station and farm is situated alongside the river Turo, it is really, fantastic example of what a coffee farm can be. So let's go through the statistics. So of course, it is from Ethiopia. It's from the Guji zone. The nearest town is Yirgachev. The farm is called Sora. Varietals, it is completely unknown what the varietals are. That's very typical for Ethiopia. They are indigenous and wild varietals. It is a naturally processed coffee owned by Israel de Geffer. Has an altitude of 1,900 to 2,350 meters, is 250 hectares, of which 150 is planted with coffee. Now let's go back to Steve and let him do some tasting. Okay, so into the cup. Now this coffee in previous years has tasted very much about blueberries. Blueberries. But it's changed a little this year. It's got a real floral note to it. I don't like this descriptor. I use it very rarely, but it's one that really does spring to mind with this. It's very Parma Violets, you know, the little sweets you can get. A little bit of hibiscus in there as well. And then at the end, that punch of blueberry. Black fruits, a little bit like a black grape as well, and black cherry. It's just very, very dark fruits it's got there. It's incredibly elegant and clean. It really is a delicious coffee. I'm really proud to work with Israel. He's just such a businessman, but also loves coffee. Like, his passion for coffee is infectious, and he's a real top guy to work with. Listen, thank you very much for joining me as always. But do remember, I've got the hiccups and life is too short for bad coffee.